Well, that time of the year has officially arrived. The time to look back at all the great and not so great music from the last 365 days and make good old top 10 lists out of them. And we're starting off with the Bad Batch. Before we get any further, I want to lay some ground rules for this list. I've specifically titled this video Worst Albums of the Year because, well, it's a better title, but this list will include both albums and EPs. And to be totally honest with you, it's merely because there wasn't that much truly bad music out there in 2024. I will also be weighing LPs and EPs differently, whereas I'll be a little bit more lenient to EPs and harsher on full-length projects like albums, because it takes a lot more effort to make a bad album than a bad EP. Or is it less effort? Is it less effort or regardless? And final thing, these are very obviously just my opinions. Do not take them as gospel truths. That being said, I did my best to fill this list with objectively bad records. There are some other projects that didn't make this list that I would personally probably add to my own top 10 worst records of the year, but I recognize that I may have a harsher bias one way or another. So without any further ado, let's hop into my picks for the 10 worst EDM albums of 2024. I'm gonna be honest and upfront with you guys right away. This list can be really easy to make because of all the commercial slop in the EDM and EDM adjacent spaces. When artists have specifically designed their records to be listened to by a wide-ranging audience, they typically tend to play things a lot safer and more reserved, not wanting to take any big sonic risks. But what happens on the flip side is that they play things so safe and generic that no one really cares about it. A record that's made purely to be background music at the mall. And also, if it's gonna be your self-titled album, you gotta make it your best work, not your worst. Kygo hopped into the music scene back in 2016 with their debut record, Cloud9, an album I actually really resonated with at the time and enjoyed for introducing me to the blissful sounds of tropical house. But 8 years and 4 records later, Kygo hasn't really matured as an artist, opting to make albums with the same old song structure, melodies, and even tone. I'm starting to think that Kygo is a one-trick pony and he really doesn't know how to make anything other than tropical house at this point. But if I'm being honest, if he just stayed in his lane and did what he was best at, I don't think this album would have landed on this list. I mean, it is at the number 10 spot. But no, Kygo wanted to jump on the cover bandwagon, a trend that is currently a plague in the EDM and dance pop scenes. The biggest single release from this record was Whatever with Ava Max, which covers Shakira's iconic Whenever, Wherever, and absolutely nukes everything about what people enjoyed from the original song. The song's pacing is too slow, the mix quality is so linear, and Ava just doesn't have that Shakira vocal inflection that makes Shakira such an iconic singer. But even more than that, for some strange reason, Kygo put his old Wait remix by M83 on this album as well. And I must say, I'm not sure there is a more blatant disrespect for the source material than this remix. The original is a masterpiece of shoegaze sound design and songwriting with a grand sense of power and feeling that you can do anything in the world listening to that song. But no, Kygo just had to go and butcher that track as well, turning it into a shell of its former glory with an empty tropical house melody and sped up BPM for some reason that doesn't even land in the 120 range that commercial listeners fiend for. There is a lot more junk on this record, but for the most part, it's just radio slop with no real passion or energy put into the thing. And it wasn't until this record that I truly realized how long Kygo's albums typically are, because every time I listen to this one in particular, it just feels like a slog to get through. Won't see me cry no tears. This next entrant will for sure be my biggest hot take of this list. And I'll be honest in saying that I don't really think that all the tracks are really that bad. Even one or two I actually really enjoy. But more than anything, I feel like this record absolutely craps on what it means to make a well-packaged, cohesive, and interesting EP to listen to. To me, this EP is really split into two major sections. On one hand, you've got some okay but nothing special house production that really isn't trying to do too much. The songs are relatively fine, if more than anything just incredibly generic. And 99 times out of 100, that won't land a project like this on my year-end worst albums list. But ARTY did something unique with this EP, and I absolutely hate it. This man made the same song 3 times, twice. I know that's a little confusing, so let me spell it out for you. 6 of the 12 songs on this EP are just 2 individual songs that have been reproduced 2 additional times. You've got the title track, Favorite Sound, and then you've got Favorite Sound Rework, and then you've got Favorite Sound again, but this time it's with Silk. Then just 2 songs later, you've got In My Head with Jay Sorrow, and following that is, again, In My Head, now with Haska as well, and then immediately again, you've got In My Head, but this time it's with Etherwood. I do not understand the point of reproducing a song 2 additional times, twice in the span of a single track list. You know, the longer I've done this Bowtied media channel for, the more I have found an appreciation for things like mixing, sampling, and most importantly, track list structure. The amount of times I've gone back to projects I used to love as a kid and now recognize they hit so hard because of how the track list is set up is way more times than I can count. So when I saw a new EP that looked like this, I was quite apprehensive. I think ultimately, I put this record on this list because this speaks to a trend I currently hate about EDM. All music morphs and changes with the times to stay relevant, but I can't help but feel like EDM specifically has suffered the most from streaming platforms. When everything is curated to land on editorial playlists, it can quickly become a quantity over quality game, and I believe that EDM is one of the easiest genres of music to pump out fast music, and I just don't like that. I don't want to listen to slowed down and sped up versions of a song I already like, and I especially don't want to hear the same song multiple times on a single track list. So I'm sorry it had to be ARTY that took the brunt of this rant, but please, let's get back to quality over quantity. Within the bass side of the EDM industry, there are a couple of artists that I continually struggle to understand what their goals are. It feels like each release is a middle finger to the fans, and there isn't really any semblance of trying to switch up their style or tone. And maybe it's just because these aren't the circles of people I find myself in conversation with continually, and there really is an audience for these types of projects. But man, this one's a hard listen for me. Riot Ten feels like an easy target for a spot on this list. For years, this man has stayed true to this style of aggressive, crass, and typically offensive dubstep production with a hip-hop edge to it. Funny enough, I actually don't think this is his worst EP by any means, actually. Considering that this landed on Monster Cat this year, it had a lot more eyes on it within my personal sphere of friends. But there is clearly an audience for this kind of music because if you look at the streaming numbers, more than half of these tracks are above the 200,000 benchmark. So more than anything, I just want to know who this EP is for. Where are all the Riot Ten fans? Because I haven't really seen any of them. I don't know where they are. Drop it. Riot Ten to me just embodies this side of EDM that I don't really care for and sometimes even actively dislike. I imagine these songs being played at a festival and they're just limbs flying around with absolutely no regard for personal space or well-being. Don't give a fuck if you swerve in my lane! I can really picture just a coked out partygoer on the rail throwing their heads back and forth with enough momentum to break their own necks. And honestly, I don't want to harp on those type of EDM fans too much, considering they really do take up a large slice of the holistic pie. But then you've got a song called Elbows to the Dome with a repeating stanza of Move Bitch. You just lose some credibility with me for that. Bodies keep rolling, elbows to the dome. I feel like I've hit the age in life where I can truly recognize trends in the music industry in real time. Yeah, it's easy to listen back to certain eras and hear the differences, but I've gotten to a point where I can very tangibly hear year over year how things have changed, especially over the course of a decade, let's say. And I love that because you get to see some of your favorite artists grow and mature. But the sad truth of the matter is that you don't always get better. There was a good half-decade for me where Galantis was one of my favorite artists. I largely credit their debut album Pharmacy as being one of the most pivotal albums of my youth in terms of shaping what kind of music I enjoy today. But album after album, I felt like Galantis just starting to slip into a shell of their former selves. It seems like each new record of theirs has been trying to chase the popular sounds of that era and that year, essentially being a derivative of house music as a whole. But it was definitely RX that broke me. I specifically remember listening to this album for the first time on a road trip with my sister, who also listened to a lot of Galantis with me. And we both were just sad. The production is incredibly bland, the melodies uninteresting, and the lyricism some of the worst in house music this year. Numerous times, I audibly cringed at the lyricism. So here's just a taste of some of the wild lines from this album. Sparkle hard like pop rocks. Pop rocks don't sparkle. Their whole thing is that they pop in your mouth. In fact, the actual pop rocks are like a dull matte color and they don't shine at all. You said I sent a drunk text, so still chase the high. Don't answer it. I'll hold your ghost until I die. What even does this mean? And on a song called 6 Feet Down, which is how deep someone is buried after they die? Why? I don't get this one? Then the start of Side Effects says, I keep walking after dark, feeling spaced out in the park. This sounds like a rhyme an elementary school student would come up with for their first ever poem they wrote. I'm genuinely just sad at the state in which Galantis is heading into in 2025. And while I can't place all the blame on him, 3 times on this album, David Guetta joins as a production feature, and I just know he's not providing quality production assistance at all anymore. I also don't really understand the theme of this record. RX is very clearly alluding to there being some theme of medication and health, but other than a track or two, there is no talk of medicine or healthcare beyond the generic, your love is my drug. And one last thing. One of the lead singles, Bang Bang, my neurodivergent anthem, is a terrible anthem for neurodivergence. You know I hate sometimes my mind can run faster than a bullet from a gun. My heart is like a trigger in my chest. There it goes again. Bang, bang, it's in my head. It's just trying to be relatable, but falls so flat. There is a certain trend in bass music that I absolutely love to hate right now. And that's these dark, moody, masked up dubstep and rhythm producers who live solely off the fact that they're edgy. You know, sometimes they can produce killer projects and even put on some good shows, but from what I've heard, for every one good project out there, there's at least 2 bad ones. Of all the masked up bass music producers, Deathpact might actually be one of the originals, which is kind of hard to track because, well, none of them had unique identities. Well, Deathpact's early 2024 album of From Darkness is a fine dubstep and trap record with a fair amount of highlights, but equally as many lowlights. CIPHER 3 is just 4 straight duds of terrible rhythm production. From the get-go, this EP was struggling as the 75-second track 21 Questions kicks things off as this weird pseudo-intro, half-joking, completely useless piece of music. There is no drop, there is no story, and there is no real melody. The song even sounds like one of those make a song with no volume YouTube challenge videos, but even those are better than this.
Ask yourself, why the fuck do I stare at my phone all day?
Then the other 3 tracks are just mindless rhythm tunes that try way too hard to scratch that edgy itch. They are incredibly linear, very short, and lack anything remotely special.
Follow me, cause I got the dog in me. I got the dog in me.
Dog and Me might be the least egregiously bad tracks of the bunch, but Bup Bup and 4+4 do not help the project's case at all. Bup Bup has this odd vocal sample that sounds like it's coming from a Skibbity Toilet video, while on the production side of things, it's a disaster class on how to make rhythm sound appealing. Then 4+4 is the grimiest mid-tempo dubstep hybrid cut I've heard all year, and I don't mean that in a good way. In the end, this EP was just a sorry excuse of a record that Deathpact should keep hiding his face from. When it comes to the music industry, the sad truth of the matter is that the actual music isn't everything. Attached to every piece of music, whether big or small, is branding and marketing. And more often than not, the images, graphics, and sometimes memes that accompany a piece of music can heighten your experience with it. Album art is so important. When you think of any type of music, you almost immediately think of its accompanying artwork. So it's a real shame when the art is the best part of your project.
Game on psychic.
The title of this album is an Italian term that literally means light dark. And while I really do vibe with the branding of this record, in execution, it's really quite far from being light dark and instead just dark dark. This phrase, chiaroscuro, is also a genre of art primarily from the Renaissance era that uses lots of contrast, dark backgrounds, and moody aesthetics. Again, I think the branding of this record is quite fantastic. The album art perfectly encapsulates that sense of chiaroscuro. But the music, it just doesn't hold up.
Abracadabra, bitch.
Blending together the sounds of dubstep, trap, and hip-hop can often yield positive results. Yet Borgore provides little to latch onto. The lyricism is crass, the flows are awkward, the kicks are flat, the synths are weak, and you're constantly being hit by tonal whiplash. This is a messy record that's trying way too hard to be cool.
Trying not to crash, kill mucho cash, mujeres with the ass.
I'd be lying if I said that Borgore came into 2024 with the greatest track record. But after a 5-year hiatus from a fleshed out longer album, I maybe unjustifiably expected his return to the format being one of grand nature. And again, I saw that album art and genuinely got excited. I don't know if it was just me, but the dichotomy of this picturesque album art and just the most disgusting rap lyricism was truly an oil and water moment. I believe that there are some artists in the EDM space that genuinely do not care about production quality. And honestly, it works for some of them. Artists have found so much success off their name value alone that it doesn't really matter what they put out. People will listen to it. So much so that they can release a 3-part project of pure trash and people will still eat it up. Let's go! I am genuinely shocked that there are people that listen to this and think to themselves, yeah, this is great. Timmy Trumpet's 3-part SINPHONY is quite frankly a disgrace of electronic dance music production. I'm not sure what hypebeasts are in Timmy Trumpet's corner, but he needs to find some groupies that will tell him the cold hard truth that this hardstyle EDM bender that Timmy Trumpet is on is not a great look. While the second installment of his SINPHONY series of EPs is the worst of the 3, it isn't by much. Quite frankly, I feel like all 3 deserve to be on this list. These tracks embody the sentiment of just because you can doesn't mean you should. We've seen artists tackle more orchestral and classical aesthetics like Apache, Aoki, and Cone Sound. And each have worked on those sounds for years and very carefully honored the music that they are modernizing. But not Timmy Trumpet. The man heard that this sound design can work and just decided he wanted to do it himself without asking the most important question, why?
Drunk on Friday, trying to fight it, don't wanna spend the night.
But what bugs me the most about this whole thing is the name. After the first installment, Timmy Trumpet pretty much gives up on that classical sounding instrumentation. The first installment was way more on the nose with song titles like Wolfgang, O Fortuna, and AI Medeus. So what songs are on the second installment? Well, you've got Let's Go Raving, Drunk on a Friday, Addicted to Rave, Snake Pit, and Eulogy. At least the first and third installment had the balls to blend classical and hardstyle for real. He pretty much just gave up on this with the second one. I'm shocked this EP exists. Having done this list for a couple years now, there are a certain few artists that seem like they're magnetized to landing here. They yearn for the worst list more than anyone else, apparently. And honestly, it feels like a cop-out at this point, and I feel like I'm running out of things to say about this guy. But here we are again, and yes, this is indeed his worst album yet. Steve Aoki's Paragon is an 18-song, almost hour-long cacophony of pure slop. And to make things even worse, he's bringing down other artists with him, as he usually does. Only one song of this record is made by just Steve Aoki himself, and even that song sounds like a far cry from his best. Neo, Kid Cudi, Kid, Bassjackers, Lil Jon, and so many more struggle to help Steve Aoki out here and practically join him as the ship sinks. Which is sad because I love producers like Kid. Lose My Mind is genuinely a great track on this album, but this one banger can't make up for 53 more minutes of junk. More than anything though, I just struggle with how boring the record is. If there was at least some clear direction and drive going one way or another, maybe it's more passable, but it doesn't have that. It has nothing going for it. Ultimately, there's no sense of tonal cohesion, narrative flow, or even consistent production quality. The beats are drabs, the features offer next to nothing, and your core EDM audience is deeply struggling to find anything to relate to. Truly a new low for the cake-throwing man. This will be the second year in a row now that justifies why this list includes both albums and EPs. I do think that Steve Aoki's record was the worst album of the year, that I have no doubt in my mind about, but it wasn't the worst project of the year. Oh, it's not even close to these next two.
Are you ready? Ready for a rim job?
This is absolutely disgusting in every way. Basic ass beats, horrible songwriting, and possibly the most mind-numbing sound design I have heard this year. Nothing about this album is pleasing. In fact, there are multiple times I was visibly shook from what I was hearing. And I'm not someone to immediately hear sex sounds and think it's, oh, bad, this is terrible. It's bad because it's just bad.
Gag on it, suck it up, eat it up.
I was very curious though to see who her producer was for this record, and yep, it's Dr. Luke. Yeah, let's have the man who's allegedly sexually, physically, verbally, and emotionally abused his former artists he's worked with to write songs called Gag on It, Get Fucked, Rim Job, Cock Blocker, Butt Slut, Whale Cock, and Can We Fuck. Pardon my language.
Me faster, fuck me faster. Looking for my demo. Free Willy, your name.
For someone like Kim Petras that's trying to be a voice in the music industry for the LGBTQ+ community, bringing on Dr. Luke was a complete misstep in multiple ways. Even regardless of the allegations, Dr. Luke is a terrible producer. He makes bland beats on vanilla songs that are meant to purely stream well for an audience that doesn't know any better.
A cock blocker. Cock blocker.
My biggest problem with this EP is that Kim Petras has shown us that she can make a serviceable, sexy dance pop record. With 2023's Problematique, Dr. Luke even helped produce that album too, and things sort of worked out there. So what happened between Problematique and Slut Pop Miami? Were the streaming numbers not high enough so they had to double down on the sex for this project? You've done it once before and it wasn't even half bad, so why go back? Why do it again? And do it even worse? I'm convinced that the only people that listen to this EP are college students who are trying to actively hook up, and that's it.
Doggy doggy, rough rough.
I'm not sure there has been an easier number one pick for this list in my life, nor will there ever be moving forward. Here's to hoping. This is potentially the easiest self-layup for me to dunk on that I have ever listened to.
I'm your guilty pleasure. I'm your guilty.
Ladies and gentlemen, gay pop is here. Yep, child dancer, wannabe actress, and now fully fledged musician, JoJo Siwa is here to change the game with her new style of gay pop.
It's like K-pop, right? But it's gay pop.
Releasing right in the middle of 2024 was her debut 5-track EP, Guilty Pleasure. And let me tell you, no one that even slightly cares about music is listening to this, even as a guilty pleasure.
When you choose another, make sure you
You really can be big enough to fail. JoJo Siwa has shown the world that you can't do whatever you want in a creative space like the music industry. First things first, the songs are just bad. The production is bland, the mixing is flat, the beats are basic, the vocals sound terrible, and the lyrics sound like they were written on the wall of an elementary school bathroom. There is nothing redeeming about these tracks.
I was a wild child, you always knew it. It was
From a branding perspective, JoJo and whatever marketing team she has are clearly so out of touch with reality. What demographic are they even trying to reach here? These songs are literally made for children that have just learned how to download songs on their iPad. There is absolutely no attempt at serious songwriting or lyricism at all. This whole project just reeks of ineptitude all around and sounds so hollow that she's convincing me that our Earth really is hollow. If there's anything positive I have to say about this record, it's that people weren't tricked into listening to this crap. After her debut single, Karma, did relatively well streaming-wise, hitting about 27 million plays on Spotify by the end of the year, the other 4 tracks combined for less than 5 million streams. People heard Karma and noped the hell out of there, not even bothering to check out the finished project, and honestly, I wish I'd done the same. Well, another year, another top 10 list of garbage records and or garbage takes if you disagreed with me, which I'd be interested in hearing in the comment section below. I'm quite active in the comments and do read every single one, so I'd really love to hear what you think about any and all of these projects on this list. But with that being said, I'm Dakota from Bowtied Media, and I'll see you guys in another video.